Lionel Shriver, welcome to Dad Saves America.
It's my pleasure. I have to tell you, because, we say these things off camera. I want to say it on camera. I'm a big fan of your podcast. I think you're one of the most intelligent hosts out there. I watch most of them. I was especially enjoyed the series on debates because I was the president of my junior high school debate club. And so I really identified with that. And that was in the olden days when you were allowed to debate.
Well, it's really kind of you to say and to repeat. When Nolan reached out and said you were going to be coming on the show, my producer, Nolan, I was excited because I've seen your work from afar. But as we were saying off camera, I have not read any of your books, which makes me both embarrassed and an opportunity to play beginner's mind and innocent / ignorant explorer with you. You have written a lot of books. You are a firebrand, and you're a courageous author. You can't look at the stuff you've tackled when you've tackled it and not see the courage in it. And your new book here, A Better Life, is a novel about migration. So let's start here because it's obviously very timely. As we sit here in February 2026, ICE and Minnesota and the progressive battling in the streets over immigration is among the many crazy things in our news feeds. So, give a flyover of the book and how you decided to even get do a novel in this way.
Well, I've been transfixed by the whole issue of immigration for at least 30 years. I was originally a big amateur demographer, but demography and immigration are like this. So, and also I've been an immigrant, and that makes the issue interesting to me. I should say I've always been a legal immigrant. And I forecast some time ago that would be the dominant issue of this century. So as a novelist, why would I not write about it? I mean, I find it irresistible. It also has a moral complexity like almost no other issue that I can think of. So my feelings are conflicted, and I like that. That's rich. What triggered this book, though, was in 2023, then Mayor Eric Adams in New York City, who was already experiencing this inundation of migrants from Biden's de facto open borders, proposed that he would start a program whereby New Yorkers would put up migrants in their own spare bedrooms, and he would pay them. And this would be a win-win because New Yorkers would make money, and on the other hand, it would still save the city of New York a fair bit of money because on lodging alone, they were paying almost $400 a head every night.
Every night?
Every night. And, you're pretty good at math.
I'm good with logic, arithmetic in my head. There's high schoolers that can beat me, but
well, when you're starting with the 2 zeros, you know you're going to add a bunch more.
Yeah.
And that program never came to pass, but it did in my book. It was actually a convenience to me that he didn't follow through on it because it made my book more interesting, more fictional, if you will.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't having to battle a lot of real stories. So this is about a mother with 3 grown children. She lives in a massive house in Ditmas Park. You've lived in New York, so you must be familiar with Ditmas Park. It's a very unusual neighborhood. It's full of these enormous houses. And there was a period of time in the 90s that they were going for a song because they were in very poor repair. They were a nightmare to heat. They still are.
They're old.
And so it looks as if this woman is crazy rich, but she isn't really.
Yeah.
She's divorced. She fell out with her husband partially over politics. She's a classic progressive, and so she's behind the Omni cause, including, being very pro-immigration, and she signs up for this program. And she's living with her 26-year-old son, who is not employed, not really doing anything with himself. He got a degree in engineering, but hasn't done anything with it. He's basically boycotting adulthood.
All right, real quick. If you like what you're seeing and you want to see more, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell. It lets YouTube know that you want to see more Dad Saves America, and it helps spread the word. So it's one of the best things you can do to support what we're doing. And now, back to the show.
You're in Spain or in Portugal. I think what's the term they use there? Is it niños, like the no income, no degree, no job, or what is that? In Spain, there's a term for this character that you're describing in Spain.
Well, there probably is in Portugal too, but that's where I am.
Yeah.
And along with my poor Portuguese in relation to every other word, I don't know it.
Okay, fair enough.
But the whole story is seen through the son's eyes. And his name is Nico, and he really doesn't want his mother to bring some foreigner into their home. And he is also much more conservative than she is. It's a partially reactive politics, and partially, let's give him a little credit. He's done some thinking on his own. So he's watched a lot of Victor Davis Hanson videos. So far.
Not a bad place to start.
And so they bring in one woman, a Honduran migrant who's going to apply for asylum, and she seems like, almost too good to be true. She's delightful. She's positive. She's energetic. She loves the house. She loves the family. She loves his grown sisters, becomes, their best friend. She's always cleaning, shopping and cooking. She makes herself indispensable. And Nico is very suspicious. He is much more cynical about human nature. And there are a sequence of events that imperil his mother's finances, among other things, that could be interpreted in one way or another. And that's part of the whole concept of the book, that who is this person? You don't actually know who she is.
Yeah.
And I put together what I think is a credible A or B scenario, because these events can credibly be interpreted in more than one way. And she could be a perfectly innocent person who is herself the victim of events and some very unpleasant people in her country. But she could be a lying sack of and of course, we know which Nico thinks she is. But the book itself does not resolve it for the reader. It's really left to the reader. And in a way, Martine stands in for the issue of immigration itself. That you can take the same facts and interpret them in wildly different ways. You can see immigration as the salvation of the U.S., as integral to who we are, as the answer in a world of declining birth rates, and as bringing new blood and new vitality to a country that at 250 years is no longer as young as it used to be. And then there's another way of looking at immigration, as especially we're talking about mass immigration, in a very short period of time, apropos of Joe Biden's administration, that you can see it as an invasion of foreigners, and also the importation of, to use Thomas Friedman's terminology, the forces of disorder into the world of order, and therefore endangering our hang, right? And now, fiction has traditionally only looked at immigration from a positive perspective. It's always looking at the immigrant's experience and almost never looking at the host population's experience. And I think that's one of the things that distinguishes this novel, if nothing else, is that it is willing to look at this issue from more than one perspective, and it is willing to explore the highly emotional experience of being in the so-called settled population, and suddenly being inundated with people from somewhere else. And you may find them at first a nice addition. Oh, great, new ethnic restaurants. But it's I am sympathetic with, once it crosses a certain numerical proportion, suddenly becoming like, hold on a minute, my neighborhood is completely transforming. I don't know these people. I can't even communicate with these people because we don't speak the same language. I feel taken over, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there are a lot of regions in the U.S., especially during the Biden administration, that had great reason to be resentful.
It is one of the things that's made talking about immigration in this time period so I think complicated is that I think that America, the United States, has its own history here that's quite distinct from our Western European neighbors or friends across the pond, or whatever you want to call them. Sometimes they're not so friendly. But, the Europe and the migration crisis in Europe into countries that do have are more like blood and soil countries. They're places that, have a long history of being an ethnicity as well, a nation in the old sense, in the old world sense, except for maybe Southern Italy, where my genetics come from, which has always been like kind of a mix. It seems very different. Like our friends in London, in England more broadly, that they're facing something that feels a little different than the United States, which has generally had waves of immigration for a long time. And we have this at least ethos or narrative about being a nation of immigrants, even though I know that's actually more recent than people realize as a term. So I guess let's start there. How do you think about the differences between the issues of immigration in the U.S. as somebody who's lived all around the world? You're currently in Portugal. You're an American, though, versus in Europe. I imagine you've got a really interesting perspective on that.
I acknowledge there are differences. I lived for 36 years in the UK, and that involved living through the enormous transformation, especially in London, of the population. I lived there for 24 years, and that encompassed pretty much the entire time of the period that Tony Blair kicked off, of enormous immigration, and especially from the Muslim world. And that is the big difference. I'd push back a little. I know that we in the U.S. tend to be hamstrung by our own mythology about ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that is in some ways an unfair constraint. It is as if, because we did go through waves of immigration from Europe around the turn of the last century, that we always have to do that, right? That we aren't really justified in turning anyone away. And that's certainly the way the progressive left now feels. That, you know, whether they actually claim that they want open borders, if you follow the logic of their opinions, because they don't really believe that we have the right to deport anybody, they do believe in open borders.
I mean, maybe the most perfect encapsulation of their complete incoherence was on the stage of the Grammys recently, where Billie Eilish said something like, I can't even remember the logic, but it was something to the effect of,
no one is illegal on stolen land.
Right? It's like, well then, stolen land has an assumption that there's something called property. Therefore, what are you talking about? Actually, people are illegal on stolen land, because if it's stolen, who was it stolen from? But this is
you've got to watch these left-wing shibboleths, because even that their favorite aphorism that no human being is illegal is wrong. Your presence is illegal. You're illegal. You can't live there. You don't have permission. So it's just a ludicrous thing to say that if they think that if they say it often enough, we'll buy it. But I think that this American exceptionalism in relation to immigration, it makes Americans feel that they don't have a right to have immigration laws. And it also implies that Americans are not like anyone else. They don't have normal psychological, emotional, and anthropological reactions to enormous numbers of foreigners pouring into their country. We're supposed to think it's all fine, all the more the merrier. And if it starts to piss us off, we're not supposed to say anything. We're required to suppress that resentment that I mentioned, because it is unjustified. We're a nation of immigrants. You're supposed to welcome everybody. And yet I believe that this gut response to a certain quantity of people who are from elsewhere, wherever they're from, is a normal human reaction. And I see it all over the world. It doesn't have to do with race. The South Africans really resent huge numbers of Zimbabweans coming in.
Yeah.
Nigeria in the 1980s expelled millions of Ghanaians who had entered their country in quantity and had become the source of enormous popular resentment. Colombia has had a popular resistance to all these Venezuelans pouring in.
Oh, yeah.
These are people who are all the same race. And this isn't about race. It is about otherness, if you will. That's one of the less favorite words. It is about otherness. And there is such a thing. Or in-group, out-group. And I don't think it's fair to say that the United States and Americans are not allowed to have these normal responses because of our history. And after all, most countries are the result of some kind of migration. The human race started out kind of small and spread everywhere. So there are not very many countries that could claim to be made up of entirely indigenous populations, because there didn't used to be people in most places. So, when you're going to be extreme about it, we're all immigrants. We are all descended from migrants.
I mean, the notion of indigenous is so obviously like a political scam, because for a simple reason, and that is, last time I checked, England has an indigenous population, and all of the people that talk about being indigenous don't care about that. Or say Sweden
I
or
know.
Norway or any basically like fair-skinned northern society. None of that matters. And then the same people never seem to even talk about or care about just how fundamentally anti-immigrant all of Asia is. It's so selective. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that this sort of radical left, and I'm going to say, like, and so you watch the show, I'm like softer on immigration than most of the people that are my compatriots on the right of center. But why does the left focus so narrowly just on essentially the United States and Western Europe as being like the distinct places where you can't have indigenousness unless it's brown, and that's it? It's like it's this so obviously hypocritical, very narrow, very selective, clearly purposeful way to frame things. What's going on there from your perspective?
Let's keep it to right now to the American left, but it pretty much goes for the whole group of them. They're always defending minorities, and it's as if it's about the other, if you will. But it's not. It's always about intra-group rivalry. And if we're talking about white people, it's in relation to other white people in the West. If they're Americans, they're especially focused on other Americans. It is an act of hostility toward their own group, but it's misunderstood as white guilt. They don't feel guilty, okay? They feel superior. And the whole move is to effectively remove themselves from their own group, from their own racial group, from their own nationality. In fact, this was commonplace when I was younger, and I'm afraid I probably participated in it. When I first was traveling in Europe, I was ashamed to be American. That was at that time very commonplace for Americans, especially of a Democratic Party perspective, would go to Europe and say really mean things about the United States and about Americans, and yet they were Americans. And I know because I did it myself when I was like in my 20s. And the play was to not be American, right? And to not be regarded as American and not regard yourself as American because you knew how terrible they were, not we, they. And now it doesn't work. The opt-out doesn't work, right? I could deplore Americans. I was still one. I was still being perceived as one. And actually, this whole thing of trashing your own country doesn't look very good from afar. It
Unless
makes
you're in France.
Well, it's insecure. It's undignified. It is not hewing to reality because you can't trans yourself out of your nationality in the same way that you can't trans yourself out of your race. You just have to live with it, and you're really obliged to use the pronoun we, not them. And I just think the progressive left is often misunderstood because that's what it's all about. It's not about real self-hatred. It is hatred of your fellow Americans. That's whom you hate.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding that that distinction there. Is it? Are you saying that it's progressives hating essentially non-progressive America, like conservatives? It's like we need
Yeah.
to like,
Yeah.
oh, flyover America. We need to have you be replaced.
Yes.
So we're going to import your replacement, and they'll be grateful to us because aren't we so kind? And then we get to run the table on the political show because we've replaced you knuckle dragging right wingers with your red hats. Is that? I mean, I'm being
This is sort of,
hyperbolic, but is
yes.
that basically what we're talking about?
Oh, absolutely. Although I think that progressives are increasingly hostile the closer that you get to them. Like they really hate classical liberals. And the people that they have punished most severely are the people who are trying to please who regard themselves as fellow progressives, but aren't just quite far left enough. But yes, it is all about. It's not self-loathing; it's loathing for most of the country, and and there is a way in which the left believes in the Great Replacement.
Well, it's always been funny that we have the video proof of the claims here by some important, prominent, influential Democratic politicians talking quite literally, including Joe Biden, and about importing future voters. That's not
Yes.
it's we have the receipts. It's like
Yes.
so the notion that that's some right-wing conspiracy theory because Tucker Carlson started talking about it on Fox News is just not
Well,
credible.
Tucker was right.
It's
He
like,
was right on this point. He
yeah.
was right.
Yeah, so but I think the thing, where the complexity for me comes in my heart and in the way I think about what makes America distinctive is, so I moved to Texas in 2011. I have a lot of friends who are first, second, third generation from Mexico, and they're great people. They're Catholic. They're working hard. They're pretty conservative. Um, you know, I like them. I like them better than most of the graduates from top universities in the Northeast. I would do a swap for 2 conservative Mexicans for every one, maybe 3, maybe 5. For every one, like Columbia grad, I realize your present company excluded. So that, and I know that's like, well, I don't know, whatever. But like, I know that can come across, and I'm intentionally being hyperbolic there. But I'm actually not. I'm not saying that to be hyperbolic. I do believe it. Our universities are pumping out a generation of people that are our children, our native children, who hate the country, hate its values, voted for a communist in New York City at their parties where they make 180 grand a year, but don't seem to like recognize that they're in the global 1%. And then I meet guys down the street who love this country, voted for Trump, are Mexican. Yeah, their English isn't great, but they love this country more than the people that voted for Mamdani, hands down, no question about it. And I think that is a fact. So help me. How do you respond to that? How do you respond to the challenge of that for America and for like what it means to have a population that actually loves this country?
Well, we were talking about the differences between Europe and the US on this point. Europe has a serious problem because they've got an increasingly large group of people who are not culturally akin, okay? They do not assimilate.
Yes.
They do not share the same values at all. In fact, many of their values are diametrically opposed. We can get into those. The predominant nationalities that have been coming in to the U.S. in this latest wave are actually more easily assimilated because they do have our values. They do come from the same civilizational roots, right? It's a Judeo-Christian background. So it's the same moral heritage. And I'm more optimistic about our ability to assimilate even large numbers of South and Central Americans or Mexicans than I am optimistic on the behalf of the Europeans. But and what you're saying, and I entirely accept it, the kind of values that you pick up in Mexican immigrants are 1950s American values, right?
Yeah.
Hard work,
Yeah.
not naturally dependent, thou shalt not steal, whatever. And that makes the U.S. very fortunate in comparison.
You know, one of the things that immigration does, especially when it's rapid, is it changes the culture because you're bringing in literally different cultures. And I think, again, as America has this thing, right, that of being hyphenated. We're like this hyphenated society. I think America might be the United States might be the only place that quite does that. Like, I'm an African American, I'm an Italian American, I'm a Jewish American, Irish American, Mexican American, yada, yada, yada. And I think it's absolutely the case, objectively, that is part of the American culture, that we have this multicultural-ish thing. We're big. We're like the whole continent, or at least like we're a lot of a continent, sea to shining sea. But I'm also worried about the culture changes. And frankly, just to be explicit about it, I worry particularly about Islamic immigration, because I think, as we've seen in literally every Islamic country, that culture, rooted in its religion, has fundamental assertions about what's true and what's good that are at odds with what it means to be America, including like the role of religion in the state. And so how do you think about the culture challenges around immigration?
I mean, we had all those waves of immigration that we love. This is a story we love to tell ourselves in a very self-congratulatory spirit. And we assimilated all of these people from all these different places. But if you take a tiny little step back, the Italians and the Germans and the Scandinavians and the Portuguese and the British, the Greeks, they have something in common. All those countries are from Europe. And I think we're not honest with ourselves on this point. Mm-hmm. So it's not as if forever the United States has been absorbing wave after wave of people who are culturally from completely alien places. Foundationally, we are founded by Europeans. We were overwhelmingly founded to begin with by the English.
Yeah.
And our, the structure of our government is modeled on the English common law. So, okay, we did absorb all these waves of people, but they were from the same civilizational heritage. And therefore, it wasn't that big a leap. They had the same moral heritage, a Judeo-Christian grounding in what people thought was right and wrong. And furthermore, we went through a period between 1924 and 1965 when we had practically no immigrants.
Yeah, that's right.
And in fact, that was the secret. So we took in all these people that still had, whether they realized it or not, a great deal in common. And then we stopped it. And it was that crucial period between those two pieces of legislation, one that ended it and one that started it up again, that really made what the US is today, and created an American people. And that was not a hyphenated period. It was and that's what I was born into. I assume that's basically what you were born into.
I mean, it's the most obvious example that people who like my great grandparents came from, all from southern Italy, all to Philadelphia, and yet only two of my grandparents spoke any Italian, because the great grandparents didn't teach the children, because they're like, we're in America, you're an American, you speak English, even if they never got that good at it. They made sure the kids spoke English. It's just
Right.
The most basic level of cultural integration imaginable.
So I didn't grow up calling myself a German American, though I was German on both sides. But that was it was incidental. It was a point of curiosity, or maybe not even. It happened to be true, but it wasn't central to the way I thought of myself, nor is it today. But I think that we're taking, since 1965, and especially the 1990s onward, we have taken in many more people and from genuinely disparate cultures. I've said before, I think the Hispanic immigrants have more in common than with our European heritage, because they also have some European heritage.
Oh yeah.
But only about half the people who came across the border during the Biden administration were Hispanic. And
Wow, it's
everyone
only
else
about half. I didn't realize that. It's only about half.
yeah. I was really surprised to come across that statistic. And so we are right now, we have just been through a period of taking in people from very different places, not necessarily European, and that's going to test us in a way that we think we've been tested, but we haven't been. And I would say, especially in relation to Muslim immigration. I think Americans are naive about Muslims. They tend to deal with the Muslim situation as if it's just one more minority and everyone's the same, and you can't say anything bad. You can't say anything bad about Islam because that's prejudiced.
And you
What?
might be put on a murder list.
Yeah, no kidding.
So
But
that's not great.
you listen to Sam Harris. Have you listened to Sam Harris on this?
I have, though. I wouldn't put him high on my list of people whose approach I'm not a big Sam Harris fan. For a bunch of
I
reasons.
mentioned him partly because he's a liberal, right?
Yeah.
But he's just totally
Yeah.
down on and dark about Islam in a way, and it would surprise you, and uncompromisingly so.
Well, the four horsemen of the new atheism really came into the foreground in the aftermath of 9/11, and certainly used Islamic terrorism as one of their pillars of the argument they were making. Christopher Hitchens, Dawkins, Sam Harris, and there was a fourth horseman that I'm forgetting now. But
I actually wrote a piece about the fact that I was not exactly thrilled by Mamdani's election, and it wasn't purely to do with his impractical policies, but I didn't like the fact that he was Muslim. Not supposed to say that. I was interested in the fact that his religion didn't play a part appreciably in the election. Nobody wanted to say but this is the city of 9/11. What does this mean symbolically? I can tell you what it means symbolically to the Muslim community outside the United States.
Conquest.
Conquest, that was exactly the word I used. By the way, this piece was not published. It was spiked
You know,
because you can't say that. But
but they say it. Imams and clerics in the United States say this explicitly
do.
and put the videos on the internet.
Oh, this is a typical example of when you have to take people at their word when they tell you what they want to do.
That they have the jihad of the womb. They say that too.
Yes. And this is a predatory and conquering religion. It believes that everyone is secretly born a Muslim and they just have to figure it out. And they're going to help you. And it is a religion that does not believe in the separation of church and state. It's obviously oppressive to women. It's wildly hostile to homosexuality. It is utterly illiberal. And it is antithetical to our way of doing things in the United States. Now, we've been fortunate so far. We've had a very small number of Muslims, and that's been the key. They've tended to be well off.
Doctors and engineers and
a lot of them in the
Dearborn.
professional class. They don't live in ghettos, and
Except in
they
Minneapolis.
tend to be quite moderate. You know,
Yeah.
maybe Muslim in name only. They're not fanatics. They're not very good Muslims, but they are good Americans. And so I think that's, especially since we haven't recently had a lot of terrorist incidents, it's in the U.S. Then it has made us think, well, there's nothing wrong with a lot of Muslims coming in, and I'd say there's definitely nothing wrong with a few Muslims coming in, but it's very concerning if you have a large number, because then, as has happened all over Europe, they do get wise and they do not assimilate.
Now, I broadly agree with that. I was in New York City for 9/11. I voted for, I've never voted for a Democrat, to be honest, but I voted quite happily for President Bush, despite being in entertainment and nobody else I know voting for him. And then, in the 20 plus years since, I personally sort of lost a concern for Islam as an issue. It just sort of faded away in my set of things I think about and worry about at the global scale. And it came roaring back for me because of two things. One was the global reaction in the West to 10/7. I'm not Jewish. I have a lot of Jewish friends, though. I'm very sympathetic to the Israelis' circumstances. But even regardless of the Israel-Palestine politics, the reaction in our college campuses before there was any response was so monstrous and so crazy, and just seemed like, I guess there's been some horrible fifth column takeover by crypto Islamists that have planted the seeds of fifth columns across our society. That's what it looked like to me. And then I had a subsequent experience with somebody who I'd known for a long time who'd actually been radical, converted to Islam and then became quite radicalized. And I had this dialogue with him that eventually ended, but it was happening in the aftermath of 10/7, and it was oh my gosh, it just sort of brought it to the foreground for me. And then when you look at what's happening in the UK and Europe, it's all right, this is a serious issue. This is serious, and it's not as serious for us in the United States, as you said, because of the level of immigration we have relative to Europe. But I have a provisional but default position of, I don't see why we should have Islamic immigration into America, given what our Constitution is, and given that our current immigration law is quite explicit in saying that people with a totalitarian ideology, including but not limited to communists, are not admissible into this country. That is current immigration law on paper. It's on the books. You can look it up. So I don't understand how we let Mamdani or his father in this country. I don't know how, I don't see how we should have laws that even allow someone like him to run for office. And I know that that makes me sound like a far-right whack job, I guess, to some people. But it's like, what kind of society lets people come in and declare that they hate the society and then give them the opportunity to change it? That's crazy. This guy just came into this country in 2018? He shouldn't have been allowed in. He shouldn't have been allowed to become a voting member of the public and shouldn't have been allowed to run for office. That's what sane politics would have. It's like, no, you're coming in here new. How about you get to have the country that you chose because you chose to come here. Nobody forced you. But that's my take right now.
I think having a law that we don't let Muslims in is probably not going to work. It's not going to fly. But I could see restricting immigration from certain countries. And just by coincidence, they're full of Muslims. I mean, and these are, by the way, a lot of the same countries that whose immigrants are net drains on social systems. So it would kill two birds with one stone.
There's a heart. So here's the pushback, and I've gotten into very serious arguments with some of my cousin who I love, who's way on the other side of these issues than I am. But I have to remind him I'm older than him, so I have to get a little wise and be like, okay, let this be personal. But he said, look, everything you're saying about the incompatibility of the faith with our governance, and the same was said about Catholics. So that's not wrong.
Well, that doesn't mean, just because they were wrong about Catholics doesn't mean that we are wrong about Islam. It doesn't follow.
Elaborate.
They're wildly different religions, and Catholics are Christians. So there's nothing incompatible. I mean, I assume this is all about the fact that you're supposed to have loyalty to the Church in Rome. But
I guess I'm not even sure. Yeah, I think that was certainly the arguments made against, say, JFK being Catholic at the time, and dual loyalty, stuff like that.
Still, Christian doctrine is, given to Caesar. Christian doctrine believes in the separation of church and state. There is nothing explicitly incompatible between Catholicism and American democracy. Yeah. Whereas there is in Islam a requirement that your fealty is to Islam and not your nation. So that's incompatible right there. And any number of the beliefs that they espouse are contrary to American law. So I think you could build an objective case. Catholicism, fine. Islam, not fine.
It does seem like one of the ways I've thought about this, and again, I would actually love to have someone who's a very vociferous pro-Islam person on the show to push back on me hard and make the case. I want to hear it. I don't. So if you know anybody, you might not be the best lead generator for this particular.
Does it sound as if I know anybody?
if we're going to, so long as we have this thing called a nation that has laws that have a monopoly of force over its governing area, and you can make far-flung arguments from even like an anarcho-capitalist position that should be, we should move away from that as fast as we can. Okay, I'm interested in that kind of stuff. I think it's interesting. I think it's morally fascinating, especially. The state is kind of a monster. But so long as we have a country and it has laws and we believe in some notion of the rule of law, it does seem weird to allow people in whose explicit doctrine is oppositional to that law in really profound ways.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when there's like a history of like 40 plus countries that have played this out with very similar results in every one of them. Like, it just seems like this argument's not that great. It's like, how are we supposed to, like, which evidence exactly are we trying to rely on here to make the alternate case? Like, what's the strongest case you've heard in opposition to this? Our discomfort. Like, have you ever heard an argument made that's like, wow, that's pretty solid? If like, hey, we tried to keep the Catholics out isn't good. Have you heard a good one?
Well, I mean, obviously you can say this is religious discrimination. It certainly is. But you know, the word discrimination means more than one thing. You can be discriminating in a positive sense. And I think that we need an immigration law which is discriminating in a positive sense, that is selective, that chooses people who want to live in the country who are going to be good for the country. We should be selecting people through our own self-interest, not because they're family members, that's someone else's self-interest, but because they're going to help us, and that they have a high likelihood of blending in and becoming part of an ideally unified polity. I mean, the whole multicultural model is not going to work. There are too many different nationalities in the United States now, and we should not be aiming for having, you know, lots of little camps like stands at the World Fair. We have to work at becoming unified again, the United States of America. I know it sounds like some kind of stump speech or something, but we have to stop emphasizing how different we are, and diversity is our strength. Diversity is not our strength. Diversity is a weakness. It is something to forge into a coherent entity. And I think we would be well off to wildly reduce immigration, which Trump has done, and I give him credit for that, and keep it that way for a while, to go through another period of letting people, you know, move to the next generation, born in the country, lose the hyphen.
It's the book and the story involves a character who comes in from Honduras, and I don't know the whole plot because I haven't read it yet but I know that the things go. However, whether she's good or a piece of shit, as you put it, other things happen, I think, and it sounds like other characters enter by way of her presence into the lives of this family.
It becomes essentially a home invasion story.
Yeah. So, I think one of the things that I have encountered among my Mexican friends who voted for Trump, like the border towns, for example, I think it's you have to really just sociologically look at the fact that the border towns of Texas that have plus 90% Mexican ethnicity voted for Trump. Like, you just have to be like, that's really interesting. You should probably pay attention to that. It is not at all a homogenous opinion, and I think one of the things that happened after Mitt Romney's loss to Barack Obama was this like Republican reassessment, and they were like, we've got to be more pro-immigration because we're going to just demographics is destiny our way out of being a party, because so like there was this idea even on the right that like being like pandering to Latino American voters means being pro-immigration. And what the thing that's just proven to be so funny about that is like that's not even true. It's like like a lot of these people that came here, whether they came here legally or whether they maybe came here, overstayed a visa, but then it worked out, they're not in favor of an open border that lets people in. They're like, you don't like, and I'm going to say this and it's going to sound super bourgeois, and I don't really care. We had a great cleaning lady, Luz, love her like a family member, just awesome. And she was like, you don't want my cousin coming to this country. He's a bum. I'm like, really, Luz? It's like, oh, no. You only want good people. You don't want people to come here and mooch. And I think that there's do you think this is the issue, the central issue of what's made this moment different than the past, is the welfare state, the ability to come into a society and mooch off the existing taxpayers? I mean, when you said $400 per head per day in New York City, I mean, that's just like, that's not the same thing as my great grandparents coming here and being sent to a coal mine.
Right. And on top of it, in New York, they have this absurd right to shelter. And you have not heard of this?
Right to shelter?
Right to shelter.
What does that mean?
New York City is legally obliged to put up anybody who needs a place to sleep. Anybody. You have to give them a home. Now, you know, the whole thing of human rights and how eventually everything is a human right. Well, now housing is a human right in New York. And that's one of the things that made the inundation of migration so calamitous for New York, is that they were obliged legally to put all of these people up. And therefore, they started commandeering huge numbers of hotels in order to house all these people, to the point where it became much harder as a tourist to find a hotel room, because they removed so many commercial hotel rooms from the market. And I totally agree. This the whole business of uncontrolled migration is made both more onerous and more the subject of massive resentment because of the welfare state. Now, it's often said, oh, you know, if you come in as new legal immigrant, or you can't sign up to benefits, but that is incorrect. There are any number of states that now immediately put people without means on Medicaid. That means that they're getting federal dollars. New York and California both. That's a huge, as we know, that's a huge benefit. That often involves vast amounts of money, more than just cash welfare. And there's actually a passage in the novel A Better Life that details all of the different benefits that the migrants pouring in New York City can sign up to. It originally was 3 pages long. I was pressured to condense it a little bit, though I didn't accede to the request to shorten it fantastically, because it was the very length of the list was the point. I mean, it was to the everything to, you know, some outfit in Queens that were giving all migrants free bicycles. And this was not the case with your forebears who came in, and you were expected in the earlier waves of immigrants we're so proud of having absorbed. You had to make it on your own. You had to use your own networks. There was no welfare. And that's one reason that a surprisingly large number of people who went through Ellis Island actually went back home.
Yeah,
They couldn't.
something like 50% of the mass of Italian immigrants returned to Italy. It's like half over the course of that wave of the 1920s.
And, this is also a problem in Europe, which is even more generous with its welfare benefits. And so that in the UK, all these people who are getting off of dinghies, who taking a dinghy between France and the UK, crossing the English Channel, they're picked up in the middle of the channel by the government, right? They're ferried to the UK. They're put up in hotels. They're given a stipend. They get free phones. They get 3 meals a day. They get free Netflix subscriptions.
Well, of course, because you can't
Right?
be cruel. You can't be.
Right.
It can't go without.
So I think we have to tell progressives in the U.S. to start protesting that the U.S. doesn't give illegal migrants free streaming services. I mean, this is just not doable. You can't just let infinite numbers of people into your country who expect, not only who are going to get, but who often expect to be taken care of. And I think that is one of the distinctions now. We have too many people coming to the United States, not out of love of the United States, but on a transactional basis, right? They're going to get benefits of a sort that they don't have in their own country. And that's not the same as coming in as an act of new fealty to an adoptive country.
In order to tell a story and have it not be like trite propaganda, one of the things you certainly have to do is actually have the characters all be real and complex and have understandable motivations and be uncertain about. They have to be real. And if they're just an avatar for an ideological argument, that ends up being very wooden and bad. So to do that, and I assume from your illustrious career that you've done a great job, that you had to live in the minds of all these different perspectives. So which part of that process challenged your own understanding and your own opinions the most? Where did you encounter a way of thinking, a way of knowing, as we were talking about before we started, that was like, this is uncomfortable, but it might be right?
Okay, first of all, my protagonist is a hypocrite. Okay? He's very critical of these migrants and their dependencies, all those benefit programs. It's Nico who lists them out, right? But Nico is a dependent. Nico is a mooch on his mother and on his larger society. He does nothing to redeem his existence in the world. So he's more like the people he's criticizing than he admits. Deep down inside, he kind of knows it too. I built that into the structure of the book on purpose because it's complicated. And I like the fact that he doesn't have a leg to stand on. It makes a lot of his viewpoints suspect, and that's by design. We don't usually have pure opinions. They are influenced by our own self-interest and often certain irrational processes. I do think that mooches tend to dislike other mooches. They don't like the objectification of what they're doing, because you step back and it doesn't look good. And they also have this feeling like, yeah, right, I've got your number. I'm one of you too. I know exactly what you're up to. Which is, why it makes perfect sense that Nico is suspicious of this woman, Martine, who comes into the household. It's like, yeah, you're chirping around and dusting everything, but you're just ingratiating yourself, trying to justify the fact that you're, on the take. Otherwise, there were any number of instances where I'm putting the immigrant point of view, the pro-immigration point of view, and it's very persuasive. It is. Martine and Nico have a conversation at a midpoint in the book, and she's pointing out, you know, you aren't working, you don't have a girlfriend, you don't appear to have any plans to have any kids. Your two sisters, who are in their 30s, haven't had any kids, right? Who's this house going to end up with, right? Nobody, your family's going to disappear. Who else is going to inherit this house and therefore this country, but people like me who are willing to have children? And she's right. She's totally right.
Yeah.
And then she says, you know, I'm from a background where you have to fight for everything that you've got. You've become complacent. You take everything for granted. I make a better American than you did. And she's right. She makes it. It's what we were talking about. Your neighbors, your Mexican neighbors, are making better Americans in the old style, the way we used to think of ourselves, than the generations that are the product of our corrupt universities.
It's the hardest thing for people to hear. It sounds like self-hatred or like a disgusting insult. One of the in some sense, Vivek Ramaswamy took himself out of the national political conversation early in the Trump administration at the start of about this time last year by taking to Twitter with regard to the H-1B visa and basically saying India and East Asia just have better cultures than average Americans. They study, they work hard, they put their nose to the grindstone. They don't just. And then he made weird references to nerd culture and Saved by the Bell or some other nonsense. It was I don't know what you're talking about here. But at the end of the day, he made an argument that isn't too dissimilar from what I said earlier. And he was absolutely run out of town politically at the national at the national level. It was what are you talking about? How dare you? Shut up and get lost. And off he went to Ohio because it was okay, I guess this isn't going to fly in the current conservative movement, at least. It's one of many hard truths that people don't seem like they can hear. The fiscal catastrophes of the country, which I know you've written entire books about, the fiscal hell that is coming. There's no surer way on this channel to kill my YouTube stats than to talk about the fiscal crisis. Just all the Ponzi schemes are going to collapse. It's nobody wants to hear it.
Nobody wants to hear it. It was not a factor at all in the last presidential election.
No, I mean, the President Trump has said it explicitly. And I bring that up partly because these things are connected. When you say one of the arguments being made about immigration in the West, among sort of the technocrats, not the straight up communists, but the technocrat types, the Tony Blair types, the Bill Clinton types, is, well, if we want to keep having Social Security, this sacred right of Social Security, we're going to need to import people because we don't have enough workers. There's only 2.7 current workers for every one Social Security retiree. We should do with immigration what we probably can't do with fertility. How do you think about that, having spent time on both of these issues? And just what's your take on that argument and that whole line of thinking?
Just importing bodies doesn't work. If you do your sums, and the Europeans have done their sums, if you look at the importation of, especially a whole fairly long list of specific nationalities, the low-skilled, low-educated immigrants that we are passively letting in, but especially pre-Trump, are net drains on the system. They may provide some cheaper labor for particular industries, but if you include all their social costs, they over their lifetime, they are going to cost you money. And in Europe, they've done studies with some nationalities. It's serious money, like 600,000 euros over an individual migrant's lifetime from Somalia.
Yeah.
But
Somalia, which at any given point ranks either last or second last on the index of corruption globally. It's really,
oh yes, and they're not shy about signing up for every benefit going.
yeah.
Five
It's
times.
a corrupt society. It's like
Yeah, it
literally, definitionally a corrupt society. It's really a tragedy, but I don't know why we'd want to import that tragedy anywhere else.
So you're not going to solve the age structure problem by bringing in a bunch of low-skilled people. And one of the things that's wrong with the American immigration policy, insofar as we even have one, is the vast number of people that we let in. First off, we allow them to break the law, either by overstaying their visa or crossing the border illegally. And then it's otherwise like 70%. It's the immigrants and family reunification. It's like your cleaner didn't want her, what was it, her cousin in or something, and
Yeah.
families. I'm a novelist as well as a person who grew up in one. Families are a motley bunch, right?
Yeah.
So there's no reason to assume that bringing in someone's family is going to be good for your country. And I think that we have to stop thinking of immigration as a charity, as something that we can do to be nice to the rest of the world. And think of it in terms of self-interest. What's going to be good for this country? Now, I'm not such a restrictionist myself that I would want to cut off all immigration, though I would severely restrict it just because we've let in so many people. We need to be able to absorb the people that we're not going to get rid of. But I think we need, we should be discriminating. We shouldn't be so passive about it. No, don't, especially, if you have immigrants who you immediately allow to bring in their parents, how have you improved the age structure? You haven't. You have more old people. The immigrants themselves are going to get old. So it's not the answer. If you want to bring in new blood, make sure that these people are at least not going to be a net drain. So you want to be bringing in qualified, educated people, more likely to learn English, much more likely to seamlessly integrate with the existing population, and stop just letting people get away with stuff and then bringing in all their families and not exercising the control that you've got. I mean, there are a lot of people who want to come to the U.S. That puts the U.S. in a position of being able to be choosy. That's very fortunate, and we don't take advantage of that.
I would still consider myself politically to be very much a libertarian, which is to say the smaller the government, the better, all the way to basically zero in a perfect world. I don't think there's government in a perfect utopia. I don't think we'll ever get to that world. But, you won't find me making much of an argument for government to actively do anything generally ever. But I think that being said, there's this really sort of weird assumption that you can that the thing that made like the West, namely the Enlightenment, this sort of unique trajectory that ended up being the case that Britain becomes this hub of the Industrial Revolution and then the most benevolent empire the planet has ever seen, such that every country that was colonized by Britain in particular should be deeply, deeply thankful for that, because the alternative was being much worse off than they otherwise would be, and including the United States. And then the United States sort of takes the place of that. I think our benevolence has gotten a little shakier in the past 25 years, but in terms of on the global stage. But I think that there is an assumption now that it's something like there's magic in the air. Like what makes America, America, and makes it like a place that's the land of opportunity and a place where you would want to come and where you'll live a better life is just because it's America, as in like the physical place, as opposed to it's the legal order backed by a culture that actually wants that legal order to continue to be what it is. And you can kill that golden goose. You can just kill it. You can make it so that no, we're no longer the thing that produced the wealthiest society mankind's ever seen. And I think that's even where like my friends, and I have to have Brian back on the show, but like I consider like Brian Kaplan's a good friend of mine. He wrote a graphic novel, Open Borders. He's a hardcore libertarian. He believes in open borders. I used to think that way. And I feel like, and I moderated a debate with him, and I know I'm monologuing a little right now, which I know you as a viewer know I sometimes do. But his example he gave of the kind of thing that could work was the UAE. And like that was his sort of case study in the kind of immigration policy that he thinks would be better. And it was like, well, I don't want to be the UAE. Also, the UAE kicks people out real fast if they violate the things the UAE wants them to be doing.
And also, doesn't it have basically a slave class?
Yeah. It's like
This is like bring back slavery.
So there's a I guess how do we navigate trying to preserve the golden goose of the West? Like, because we're getting attacked from two sides. We have an obviously like an immigration went negative in 2025, but this might be temporary while there's a Trump in office.
Right.
We're getting hit. There's two sides of this scissor cutting through us. There's the left-wing radical communists and domestically, and then you've got the importation of people on the basis of wanting to transact and extract. Mm-hmm. So how do we do how do we keep the West being a thing and not have it just be like the solution to, they say the solution to pollution is dilution. Well, Western culture is a deep, deep, deep global minority. We are not a large share of the population of planet Earth. We can vanish.
Yeah, I've written about this before. I think that the progressive left is a symptom of widespread American and Western complacency. I think that you're dealing with pretend revolutionaries who think that they can burn the place down and still get their iPad updates, right? Yeah. They can still go to Whole Foods. They're not going to burn down the Whole Foods and get their vegan dumplings. I mean, they don't have any appreciation for what real destruction is, for what real dysfunction is, and what real disorder is. So they're playing at it. It's just an entertainment for them. And it's actually a kind of belief in the formidable nature of their own country and their own civilization. it's anything but a hatred of it or a failure to embrace. It is imagining that it is so indestructible that they can throw all they like at this brick wall, this edifice of the way things are, and their own lives will never be disrupted. They can always go home to mommy, and mommy and daddy will still have a guest room waiting, and they're also taking the financial order for granted that you can still go to shops, your currency is still worth something, etc. It is taking for granted that everything will always be the same, and that's why we can make it all different, which is a little insensible. But these people are not serious. And they do not understand the fragility of democracy, of any kind of order. The history is mostly a history of disorder, little islands of peace, tranquility, and functional systems within a sea of total chaos. And it's very, very easy to revert to chaos, and they don't appreciate it.
I spent June in Colombia, in Bogota, and then a little bit around the rest of the country a little bit. It's neighboring Venezuela. I mean, Colombia itself has a president right now who's a disaster and probably a drug addict. But Venezuela, you in the streets of Bogota, what you see are Venezuelans. Like, as far as the homeless, the families begging, they're Venezuelans. It doesn't appear that there is any amount of ongoing either historical or present case studies in actually trying their communist utopian fantasies that can convince a certain mindset that they really don't have their act together on their ideas. I will encounter people who will say we need bad examples, and we do. And I'm kind of,
I think we've got enough of those.
But we've got so many of them.
Yeah.
So why is that? Why is this ideology, why is this impulse so persistent when it is as failed, as counterhuman, as irrational, as ahistorical as anything we could ever put together? The notion that we can achieve utopian, perfect equality in some Marxist sense always leads to total starvation, people being put in body bags or having to eat their dogs. It's just all horrible. Every time, everywhere, every culture, every creed, all the time, forever. But it's and yet, parties in Dumbo for Mamdani, with the most wealthy, privileged people the world has ever seen, who graduated from Ivy League schools. Is it? There's it seems unreachable. It seems like there's an unreachable mindset there. What do we do with them?
I do think it's unreachable. We're dealing with people who are spoiled, right? They've never really suffered. When they are denied anything, they go crazy. It's clear that the people who elected Mamdani, aside from the 800,000 Muslims that have recently moved to New York, they want a free apartment, right? They want free food in their sort of free government supermarkets. It's just like, give me everything I want now. And that has to be people who have never been told no about anything. So I see this with, to change subject, I see this in the ICE demonstrations.
Mm-hmm.
These people lost the bloody election, right? They lost the election. So they should have to live with the consequences of losing that election. the government is not going to be pursuing policies that Kamala Harris would have. And that's what happens if you don't like the policies. You wait till the next election and you vote for your side, you campaign for your side, and maybe then we'll go back to de facto open borders with the Democratic administration. But there's just this wild indignation on the street that this is happening and it shouldn't happen, and they're going to, go out and championing themselves. And by the way, this is more unseriousness because it's as if they can, because they're so entitled, they think they're bulletproof, that they can
Right.
put themselves in the way of armed law enforcement trying to do their jobs and nothing's going to happen to them. But I just get this childish, like temper tantrum feel of these people who are crazed that something is happening they didn't vote for because they lost the election. It's ultimately anti-democratic.
Yeah, there's a well, it's multi-layered, right? Because like in the case of Minnesota and Minneapolis, we're a big country with a lot of cities, with a lot of states. Why is it only Los Angeles and Minneapolis turned into absolutely nightmarish war zones? I think I know the answer. But it's like there's not a lot that you could say seems organic about this whole thing. And I don't want to, the one credit I'll give is like, look, governments can be despotic. We know that throughout all of society, throughout all of history. I'm not opposed to civil disobedience against actual tyranny. I'm a Jeffersonian. I think the blood of tyrants is sometimes, history has shown that sometimes you need the blood of tyrants to be spilled for the sake of renewing the tree of liberty. As much as that is a harsh thing to think about. And I would probably get mowed down in the process because I'm pushing 50. So I'm not really in warrior shape. So I think there's a certain amount of putting yourself in harm's way in the name of civil disobedience for a cause you think is just that I can at least recognize as not being merely a temper tantrum. I mean, I guess how would you respond to that? Would you say that there's at least some amount of the energy here that we shouldn't be quite so dismissive of? Or are you not, is there no fig leaf worth given to these people?
Oh, they're given so many fig leaves in the media that I'm reluctant to provide more. I mean, yeah,
Fair.
I'll give you a ritual disclaimer that I didn't regard the shootings of those two protesters as especially justified.
Yeah.
And to the degree that these people are sincerely concerned about their immigrant neighbors, they're certainly within their First Amendment rights to go out there and make their views heard. I think you have to draw the line. They do not have the right to interfere with law enforcement, and they're breaking the law. And that's, you can do that, and it's civil disobedience. And what you're supposed to do is peacefully submit to being arrested because that's the sacrifice that you meant. That's the format, not kick in the taillight of ICE vehicles. That's uncool. And I don't think that this particular population has read the rule book on civil disobedience, what you do and do not do.
Yeah, there is if you're just starting with burn the society to the ground as your ideological thing, you're really going into a nihilistic war zone situation. Then you're not saying I'm gonna try to uphold what I think is the actual the goodness of the country. And I think that if ICE and the Trump administration are violating the principles of the country as actually stated in our law, well, then you should use the legal system.
Yes.
Be arrested, have it go to court, have it go to the highest court in the land, let the policy change on the basis of the actual system. But you can't do that if you think the whole thing is a bunch of stolen land, something, and burn it all down. Like, now you're just basically a guerrilla fighter. Then it seems like.
Well, I just get waves of vanity off of these crowds when I read and listen to Vox Pops. They seem to be taken with a kind of Christological martyrdom, and it's just very egocentric, and they're enjoying themselves too much. It isn't a sacrifice. It seems to me that it's all about self-glorification, and even the immigrants they're a sideshow.
Yeah.
It's all me. I am goodness personified. I am putting myself forward to rescue our country and our democracy, and it makes me tired. I don't want to have dinner with them.
No. This is the thing that is, one of the noteworthy. I'm curious how you think about the gender politics of all of this, because this is something that you've talked about a lot. You right down to your own personal story of changing your name, from your birth name. I think you've got a very interesting perspective on gender politics, and it's very striking how feminine the protest movements of this era have become. And there's this term I brought up a couple times in the show. It's kind of internet memey, but awful, like affluent white female liberals. But you can't not see it. You can't not see the character appear everywhere. And the Omni cause is led by a white college grad, female, with her fist in the air, with a mask still on.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think about the way gender differences have played into the changing shape of our politics today?
Well, it doesn't make me feel proud to be female. I've never made a very good girl. I think women are more prone to conformity, and this is a form of conformity that it's groupsterism. It's you're not usually seeing one lone protester out there. It's a bunch of people, and I just think women are more likely to be joiners, and to want to be a part of to have a sense of belonging, and obviously the whole political left provides a kind of group membership, right? And something that I've never been on the lookout for on my own behalf. I don't like groups. I don't physically like crowds. I don't have memberships, and I'm not never and I don't like fads. It always irritates me when something I've done my whole life and suddenly everyone else is doing it. I've always bicycled everywhere since I was 8 years old. I don't drive. And then suddenly all these other cycles are on the roadway, and I'm annoyed. I hate them. But I just think women are usually, they like the collective, and also there's some kind of nurturing impulse run amok here.
Misapplied, perhaps.
Misapplied of this, this explosion of caring. But it's often insincere. It's often, again, intergroup rivalry. It's trying to show off how caring you are, which is very different from actually caring.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I mean, that's one of the trademark traits of the left is lip service to groups they ostensibly care about, but not really caring about what happens to those people or what the effects of the policies that you advocate actually have on those people. They don't care.
There was I think it was a book. I'm going to remember this in vague terms that I think are mostly correct, which was, there was a book, I think it was called like, What's the Matter? What's the Matter with Kansas? And the basic premise of the book was, why is it that these rural poor voters in places like Kansas vote for Republicans when it's against their economic interest, and Democrats are the ones that provide the kind of hand up or handout, depending on how you look at it, support and social programs, et cetera, that would actually help people in their station, and yet they choose to vote in general against their own interests on that ground. And what was funny about it is, at the time, its thesis is almost irrelevant, but it wasn't what would follow. And what followed years later was actually kind of amazingly a New York Times piece that almost, it wasn't intentionally a following of that book, but it basically was studying these exact types of folks, people who are in rural places who've been through the welfare system. And so, and are very anti-welfare. And much like the border town Mexicans who voted for Trump, the folks who actually went through the welfare system and escaped it and no longer are in it saw firsthand for real how deeply dehumanizing and trapping welfare is, and how many moochers and losers and con artists and fraudsters there are in that line to get the check, and that they were actually often the exception that fell on hard times, had to deal with it, used this as a buffer, got out as fast as they could. But they
What
saw
it's supposed to be.
Yeah, so they saw it.
It's supposed to be.
So like when you talk about this sort of the luxury beliefs and the social signaling and not caring about the people you say you care about, it does seem like it boils down to whenever your caring involves screaming about somebody else paying someone else to do something. Well, you have no idea what's actually helping the people you say. Like, why don't you go out there and do it for real? Like, do it for real. Right? I mean, is that a big part of it? It is just all luxury beliefs.
I think most of these people are completely dissociated from reality. And they don't think they care about reality. They care about ideas. They care about what other people think of them. They like getting caught up in the moment. Clearly, we're watching this, making history. But I don't think they care about what happens.
One of the things that this shades into is just a general, like, non-functioning of politics in the first world. It seems like to me, like we are being pushed into extremes. And for the viewer that maybe thinks this conversation is extreme, so be it. But there's a very worrying level of like we're off in our tribes, and the people. There's always going to be a subset of people that care about politics and policy and are paying attention. Most people are actually just trying to live their lives. But the reality is that those people that care, people like you and I, we end up mattering because we're influencers, unfortunately. And the politically active and engaged are really getting out here, way out. on both sides. There's no middle ground. There's no place to have sanity. I saw you were talking to the guys at Trigonometry about this kind of stuff. And you have another book about mania, where I know you get into some of this. So, like, are you worried that we're just going to rip ourselves apart with being so disconnected from reality and then disconnected from each other?
Well, of course, I don't have any idea what's going to happen, and you don't either. I find it almost impossible to get into my head that we have 3 more years of the Trump administration. I don't know how we're going to make it.
Why do you say that? What do you mean?
There's just this sense of self-destruction about the administration. And it's going at such a furious pace that it's like the tigers are going to turn to butter. It's just, he does such weird stuff. He does good things, and then he turns around and does something really dumb. And
Give me an example.
oh, just yesterday, berating that CNN journalist for not smiling. I mean, that just, I don't know whether you saw that footage.
I didn't, but yeah, it sounds about right.
It was just the usual. He goes on these rants that are very, very personal, aimed at an individual person, trying to humiliate that person on camera. And it just backfires fantastically. And it makes you think, oh, this guy's supposed to be some kind of political genius. Well, that's not political genius. And, alienating Denmark over Greenland was not political genius. And it was completely gratuitous. He does this all the time, this gratuitous alienation of people. Or, his reaction to Rob Reiner's murder.
Yeah, that one really hit for me.
Oh, my Lord. It got him nothing. It just made him seem like a monster. And why doesn't he have more self-control? And that's why it's so hard to imagine the next 3 years. He has no self-control, and he's president of the United States. I mean, that just blows your mind.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I hate people who go on and on about Trump and how terrible he is. So, and it just bores the bejesus out of me. But it's still, the feeling is of being on this ride and you're on this roller coaster and nobody's controlling it. It's just, you don't know what's going to happen. And, and then there's the potential of unknown external events coming in from left field that you can't anticipate in an already very unstable environment. So
it's, you're an international person in a very real sense. Like you said, you're living as we sit here, you're just outside of Lisbon in Portugal. You spent decades in the UK. You're an American. You've spent some time in Israel too, I believe. So you've got a global perspective. One of the things about Trump and his warts and all, his kookiness and all, that I just find maybe inescapable is that there is this Davos man character that has emerged over the past. It's not new, actually. It's really sort of Woodrow Wilson clones, but this sort of technocratic social planner type that congregates at Davos and the World Economic Forum. It is the cookie cutter of Brussels in the EU. It is the sort of the globalist. the globalist in the sense of like having more in common with those kinds of people than with your own country, and believing in like the Tony Blair types. And there is a culture. This is where I can find some interesting ways of thinking in a Karl Marx on this, about the way class and your cohort of people that you surround yourself with tend to create a certain kind of culture, a certain kind of set of assumptions that go unchallenged when you're in your group. And that like genteel global decorum thing has really exposed itself as being diabolical, particularly with COVID. It was like that for me, that changed the way I think about the nature of our institutions and leadership. Like a lot of people, it was like, oh, I see. So you people think you're all, have decorum, the kind of Barack Obama is maybe the most perfect example of this. No drama Obama. No drama Obama gave a speech at Stanford in 2022, if I'm remembering this correctly, basically calling for the end of the First Amendment. In the name of disinformation, because people are dying because of misinformation. And I look at those people and I'm like, you know what? A wrecking ball through all of you. You're in a collective delusion that's actually quite monstrous and totalitarian. And I'm not sure we get to have like a genteel personality that's willing to take you people on. I think we inevitably are gonna end up with Attila the Hun in one form or another, and that's what we've got with Trump.
That's what we've got. Yes,
for better or worse. And I think that's why he won again. I think it was like, oh man, I know he's not genteel and he says crazy, he rambles in weird ways, but something's got to give on that kind of global consensus. And I'm a free trader. I can find a lot of common cause at any given point with certain things, but the culture there seems really diabolical. Am I making any sense?
Oh yes, it is diabolical, and their certainty is very dangerous. It's these people who have brought in the whole net zero ideology and actually put it into practice, which is terrifying.
Deindustrialized Germany, made it dependent on Russian gas, and blew up their nuclear plants.
It's destroying Europe. It's destroying the UK. They are committing suicide. And so, I mean, it's not just an elite that sits back in the Alps and says stuff. They have put their opinions into practice. And I think you're right to point to COVID. COVID changed my view of the world. It most particularly changed my view of the so-called liberal democracy, which we abandoned literally overnight.
Yes.
Yeah. All our civil rights out the window on the knell of midnight. And I think that the what I wouldn't mind being known for, in addition to my books, is that I was one of the very first people to say we shouldn't lock down.
I remember this.
Right?
Yeah, I'm remembering this now.
Third week of March 2020, I published my first column saying, this is crazy. And it was a very unpopular perspective. And it continued to be unpopular because you remember what it was like.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, nobody seems to remember it at all. What's so interesting to me is very recent. It was horrific. It went on for 2 years. Nobody ever talks about it anymore. It's as if it's been carved out of the calendar and burned.
It's I think there's certainly among the like increasingly sclerotic press that's true. I think for a lot of normal people, there's tens of millions of Maha moms in America for whom this is very much still a live, felt issue and has transformed the way they think about things, for sure, right?
Well, there's never been any kind of formal reckoning.
No.
The lockdowns were a big mistake. In fact, they were the biggest public health mistake ever in history. Nobody has ever, set the record straight on that. They didn't work epidemiologically. They did not save lives. And they actually cost lives. They were economically disastrous. They were educationally disastrous.
They were morally indefensible on every
Yes.
dimension.
Yes. And in the United States was one of the only countries that I know of that at least had a few little protest movements like this isn't American. And I was proud of that. But for the most part, people just capitulated.
Yeah.
And that you mentioned my last book, Mania. I mean, that's really what one of the things that inspired Mania was the way in which people just completely capitulated to a radical plan that defied all the original plans of how you were supposed to confront a pandemic. And then suddenly, not far into that 2 years, you had people saying, "Oh no, another lockdown," as if it was just,
Yes.
oh, we've always done this. This is one of our traditions, and mania is really about mass conformity. It is about our species' vulnerability to ideological contagion.
One of the things that there's a bunch of different ways you can try to understand like the large scale changes that have happened. And one that I found pretty illuminating was just looking at this as a technological phenomenon. And what I mean by that is global scale social contagion is possible today because we live in the age of the internet.
Yes.
So how do you think about that? How do you think about almost at the anthropological scale? It's worth taking a step way back when we feel this chaos and this civilizational battle that is very much real. If we're part of a technology shift that is not yet fully played out and been sort of absorbed into human behavior and we found a new equilibrium, like where are we? Where are we in that from your perspective? How do you think about like the impact of technology, telecommunications, social media on global mania, on like the transformation of our politics into performativity, all of that stuff?
Oh, it's a catastrophe. I mean, I went through George Floyd's killing in the UK. And, it only took a couple of days. And everyone was trooping around these huge, this is in defiance of the lockdown, right? Nobody stopped them. Huge demonstrations going across London bridges, saying hands up, don't shoot. And they don't have an armed constabulary. So, I mean, it was as if some kind of gas came out of their laptops, right? As if they had all been drugged. This had nothing to do with them, right? It's the killing of a single drug addict in the Midwestern United States, and suddenly it's the most important thing in their lives.
Yeah.
It was bizarre. And likewise, they've been doing demonstrations about the ICE raids in Milan. And the UK is now up in arms about ICE. It has nothing to do with them. And it just never even enters their head that it has nothing to do with them because the gas is coming out of the laptop. And I mean, I'm dismayed. That's what inspired Mania was this sequence of social manias the sudden, I mean, suddenly we were obsessed with transgenderism, still ongoing, I think now in the decay stage, but, and the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter and the COVID lockdowns, and then laterally the obsession with climate change. And then there was suddenly all we care about is the Palestinians, and now it's ICE. And it's exhausting, and it's not rational. And it's scary because ultimately you realize people will believe anything as long as everyone else seems to believe it. And
Collective illusions.
yes, and now we have this technology to spread the most absurd notions. I mean, the trans thing is based on a total falsehood. You can't change sex. You can't.
Yeah. No. It's like one of the true, it's as like, anyone that knows anything about biology will say, including the most famous people in it, it's one of the true, almost singular, like, binary facts in the world. Most things are on fairly a spectrum, actually, except sex, which is entirely binary and goes all the way down to plants. it's just the entire notion, like even talking about this whole language of gender as being some concept distinct from sex. I think I no longer find myself willing to give ground on any of that. It's like, no, there's just sex.
Actually, I don't use the word gender unless I absolutely have to.
Yeah.
We need to go back to using gender about Spanish,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
It used to be a perfect synonym for sex, and it was only that was the special instance. It was linguistic. Then you didn't talk about the sex of a pronoun. You talked about the gender of a pronoun.
Right. Is it?
And I think we should go back to that.
Does it end in an A or an E?
Exactly.
One of the things that is like part of the mania, and we've talked about this already, but going back now over 20 years, you wrote a book about a school shooter that and a mother who the mother of a school shooter, and we live in this time. This is a big thing for me, as you know, as a father of now 2 boys, that there's been this endless drumbeat of talk about toxic masculinity. And then there's been, and more recently, this endless talk about how the boys have all become far right.
Mm.
And then you look at, and then in the UK, on Netflix, there was a recent special that was sort of maybe cousins with your book, which I know was turned into a movie. Adolescence. So, and of course, at a time when you have Pakistani gangs as an actual horrendous crime happening constantly in the UK. No, what this story is like a young white boy with a good family with both a mother and a father who turns out to have been radicalized by watching Andrew Tate or something and kill somebody. What do you think about everything that's been talked about around boys, having lived with this in narratively with your book and grappling with this idea of a school shooter, which are school shooters in the US are virtually entirely male, as is the population of our prisons. What's your take on the boy crisis?
Well, I'm pro-boy. Some of my best friends are male. And I do think that the feminization of any number of fields has been to their detriment. I speak specifically of publishing, which has been taken over almost entirely by women, and not for the better. Women aren't risk takers, and that's expressed itself in publishing. I'm afraid I'm the exception. And good, by the way, fair play to HarperCollins. They're still publishing me. I don't think any of the other big five would do so.
HarperCollins has like carved a lane for itself to be able to do. Most of the people that come on this show, if they have a book, they tend to be published by HarperCollins.
Yeah. It's not an accident.
Yeah.
And they do have a genuinely small C Catholic list. They still have a lot of women, but I don't know. My editor has some balls. So,
Literal or just figurative?
but I think we need masculine qualities. I mean, one of the things that I'm afraid of is any future in which the field of politics is totally taken over by women. I mean, I think that's potentially a disaster. The women who have come up through male-dominated politics have sometimes been, honorary boys, right?
Maggie Thatcher, yeah, Maggie Thatcher,
etc. But were the political world to be completely like go all female, I think that would be catastrophic. There's a certain, honestly, one of the reasons that I did not like the idea of Kamala Harris being president, and partly because she's an idiot. But it didn't seem like a good historic time to have a female president. It was a bad look. And I apologize to women everywhere. Putin would have walked all over her. She would have walked all over her. Now, they're a different kind of woman. Maybe I'd feel differently. But I thought that, at the very least, the fact that she was female didn't help, right? It was not an advantage. And it
was a heightened disadvantage because it was like she had no other qualification literally at all.
Yeah, that's why she was the candidate.
Right.
Because she was female.
Yeah.
And
it isn't merit. There was literally, she's like a vortex of anti-merit. It's like whatever merit is, she's the opposite.
And there is a place for all the masculine virtues, and they are not exclusive to men. So, forcefulness, aggression properly applied is an important capacity. Decisiveness, a willingness to pursue self-interest,
Capital
strength.
T, truth-seeking, perhaps?
Strength of every sort, yes.
Yeah.
Capacity for independent thought rather than group thought. No, they are virtues, and we're in a world where everyone isn't going to be a winner. That willingness to take part in competition and therefore risk losing. Whereas women are very uncomfortable with that. I mean, I remember when I was up for the Orange Prize in 2005, it is a prize for female writers. I was more than happy to take the money when I won, but in my perfect world, I would have rather have won a prize for both sexes. But anyway, there were, I think, 5 other women on the short list, and they didn't include me in their discussions. But apparently, before the winner was announced, they got together and decided that if any of them won, then they would agree to split the proceeds with all the others. Socialist literary prizes.
It's
Right. First of all, I thought it was astute of them to leave me out of it because I never would have been on board, and they recognized that. But how transparently pathetic, and that's both manic caring, but also just sheer underconfidence and cowardice, covering your ass, making sure you get something out of this because you aren't confident in your ability to win. And that's very female and incredibly sad.
I think one of the things that I don't know what the answer is to, but that I try to model in the show in these conversations is something that I think is really hard, and I don't know that I succeed, and that is we need to be able to actually say the truth, even when it's difficult, like everything you just said. And it's true because it's not necessary. It's true because it is obvious and because we can measure it and because it's about all the things you're describing, all the inclinations, all of the if you got 100 women in a room and threw a dart, the one that would get hit by the dart would be more likely to have the attributes you're talking about than not. That's how probabilities work. That's how averages work. Even if any given person might turn out to be totally exceptional and you happen to talk to the Margaret Thatcher in the room. This is the exact area where our boys are being left in the wilderness to figure out how to think and talk about things, because that technocrat elite bunch of zombie blob imbeciles that run everything have made this kind of conversation we're having verboten until recently. And you have to be kind of disagreeable and kind of crazy to have these kind of conversations in a world where they're not allowed. Mm-hmm. And so then in comes characters who, the Nick Fuentes types and whatnot, who take it even further and become race and identity essentialists, and our boys can kind of get lost there. They get lost between, hey, I should treat every woman as an individual, but also understand, and man for that matter, but also understand there's these average nature things that are real. That's this tension. It's a dualist kind of tension that an Andrew Tate type of character rejects and says no and takes it to the extreme and takes it off the rails. How have you, what do you think about that? What do you think about, how would you describe sort of the place we need to try to be to help our boys escape the dark recesses of the netherworld, of the black market of ideas? It's when, we've been pushed into a black market of ideas, and that means you're going to run into some nefarious characters.
Well, when I was growing up, there was a lot of talk about the war between the sexes, and it always sounded a little superficial and fake. I think it came across as a media confection. I think we're increasingly in danger of actually having one. That among younger generations, there seems to be an increasing distance between girls and boys.
Yeah.
And on the part of women, they're being encouraged to be hostile toward men and toward the masculine virtues. And I don't blame young men for feeling lost, for feeling unwanted, even a little angry, and certainly at sea as to how to deal with the women. I do worry about people's ability to form successful romantic sexual relationships. That seems to be harder and harder.
Yeah.
Actually, just did a series for Radio 4 in Britain It hasn't been broadcast yet, but it's a series of linked short stories. It's all about the same woman, 36 years old, and going on a sequence of dates. And each of these people she goes out with, these men, are each one is a credible candidate for her affections. But in each instance, there's one thing that they discover that she discovers she cannot tolerate, and then they're just out the window. And this the name of the linked short story is Nobody's Perfect. And
Yeah.
I sense
The
that,
swipe apps create the illusion that you can find the perfect match because of
yeah,
all of this so-called choice, and it's really quite
it's,
diabolical.
there are all these different factors converging, and people not meeting in person, not becoming socialized in the most primitive sense because they spend too much time on phones and are much more comfortable texting or whatever. They're terrified even of a phone call. And then there's the kind of the aftermath of the whole Me Too business, where men are terrified of actually, putting a finger on a woman's arm, and then some, it might be assault. And then there's the pornography problem,
Yeah. I
which
mean,
creates unreasonable expectations on both sides.
on
And
that touch a woman front, just real quick, one thing I noticed recently, I saw a YouTube short, and it was celebrating this, that, they showed like when American like actors or whatever have a photo with a woman, they showed like they'll put their hands around the waist and place the hand on the waist. And in Korea, they have this norm where when there's a picture, the guys, who often it's hard to tell if they're guys or girls because it's become a very feminized thing in Asia, they'll hover the hand. And it's like, I don't think it's an accident. I don't think it's unrelated that the hover hand culture has like a 0.7 fertility rate and will cease to exist in like 30 years. But anyway, these are all these bizarre things that like the fertility and like the continuing of the species, of the society, of the culture you're in. Like, this is the most rudimentary human animal stuff that's under attack.
yes, and I'm worried about the fertility rate, and I'm also just worried about collective human happiness. I recognize that the romantic relationship is capable of doing incredible destruction. There is such a thing as breaking your heart, but it's also one of the deepest sources of meaning and pleasure. And I've been married for decades. I love being married. I would want that contentment for others. And I just see people unable to find each other now. And it's somehow we've made terribly complicated what should be pretty simple and primitive. I feel sorry for men who don't know whether it's okay to ever make a pass anymore. There were any number of circumstances in my younger life where I wanted a man to make a pass at me. I was glad they did, and it was really fun and exciting. And it just seems as if that's now just not done.
It's
It's so it just seems like such an unsexy universe.
it's it's one of the weird outcomes, it seems like to me. There's a bunch of ways you could take this, what's happened here, because it's deeply ironic that in a relatively short time after women's liberation and free love in the 1960s and Kinsey and the pill and this whole thing, where all that old sort of courtship and conservatism about relationships and sex got all flipped upside down, and that we now find ourselves in a place where it's this, and it's and I'm in a situationship over text, and boys are terrified to make the first move, and all, and like the sexual relationship thing that constitutes like the human animal continuing is all disrupted and distorted and bizarre. It's like,
And also this whole business of constructing a so-called spectrum of infinite identities, but the identities are often having nothing to do with actually having. They're really just all about in your head, self-conception, and
yeah.
you know the it's like this hyper individualism. So everyone is afraid of each other, and this is bad life, and I feel sorry for them.
One of the things that I think is a dichotomy, like a competing dual truths thing, is that the American classical liberal conception of the individual as sovereign, which I happen to believe and think is profound and is fundamentally also a claim that is not materialistic, because we obviously aren't all individuals of equal capabilities. So that equality of rights or dignity or whatever you want to call it, of sovereignty, is metaphysical at the end of the day. That is in tension with everything you just were describing as these messy interconnectedness things and these habits and norms of not getting everything you want right now, of not having perfect comfort, of actually having struggle and responsibilities and pain and discomfort. And that like there's not an easy answer to that, because the purely just saying you this is where my Catholicism has come roaring back into my conception of like how I look at the world. It's like, well, I just don't think singularly defining your vision of reality as being about the individual as sovereign is enough, and is consistent with what human individuals are. So there's something else. There's some other communal nature, habits, needs that are very universal and broadly correct and broadly good. There's like a middle normal good that used to be kind of assumed. Like it was good and normal and expected that most people will get married, have kids, that have a kind of stereotypical kind of distribution of the things they do. And like 80% of people will just be happy with that. And we should be cool with that, because we want people to be happy. And that's all been wiped away by this blank slateism that is kind of a kissing cousin to individualism if it's taken to the extreme. How do you think about that? How do you wrestle with, because I know you've written about individualism and about these tensions, and it's in your work, about the tension between the individual as sovereign in a kind of rights way versus the messiness of reality and the things we actually need as a human creature to flourish and be happy and have a good life?
Well, when I was a kid in school, I was regarded as the weirdo. It was a particular role. You remember?
Oh, yeah.
We seem to have advanced to the point where everyone's a weirdo. And when everyone's a weirdo, there aren't weirdos anymore. You need a norm to be a weirdo. Now everyone wants to be a weirdo. And
when everyone's special, no one is.
no one is special.
It's a great line from the bad guy in The Incredibles, one of my favorite movies ever made.
So there's a competition as to who can be weirder. And that's that's the road to hell. I end up coming full circle that the kind of norms that my own generation rejected, like marriage and children, are fundamental to the continuation of our civilization. And while I didn't end up having children, I end up urging younger people that I meet to please consider having a family. This, despite the fact that when We Need to Talk About Kevin was published over 20 years ago, I became the queen of maternal ambivalence. But I've now become an aggressive pronatalist.
Wow, that's a big trans. So what
It is a big change.
chart that plot that course? How did you go from ambivalence, childlessness, this is an overhyped thing, motherhood shouldn't be so celebrated, to being a pronatalist? How did you get what were the steps along that path?
I did tell you that earlier in this conversation that I have long considered myself an amateur demographer. And it's funny, one of your earlier podcasts, you were pressed on something about which you had changed your mind. And one of the things that I have been forced to change my mind over, not entirely, because I would make some qualifications. I grew up being very concerned about overpopulation. And
Yeah.
and my fourth novel, called Game Control, is about a renegade demographer. And yes, there is such a thing. And it was motivated largely by my concern about runaway population growth. And that has, while I was coming to maturity, this was the biggest threat to the human race.
Yeah, Paul Ehrlich, the population bomb, all that stuff.
Plenty of precedent in other species that the deer population would get out of control, eat out all of its, eat all the foliage, and then have a mass die off. And that seemed to be what possibly was in our future.
Good old the Malthusian impulse. It's intuitive if you don't understand that people actually create and build stuff as opposed to just extract from the environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it didn't anticipate the Green Revolution, etc.
Norman Borlaug, fertilizer. Yep.
Now, I am still concerned about massive population growth in Africa, and they don't have the resources, they don't have competent governments, and they don't educate their people, and they can't keep up with the growth of the population. So let's put that aside. And the Middle East still has a very high growth rate, but I have had to revise my fears. And of course, now we've got this below replacement fertility, not only just all over the West, but increasingly pretty much everywhere but the Middle East and the continent of Africa. And this is often used as a justification for mass immigration, which I do not like on a cultural level, which we haven't really discussed, but it isn't just an economic question. So I'm hostile I am a restrictionist. I like controlled legal immigration, but not mass illegal immigration from just about anywhere. And this low fertility argument has become probably the most prominent pro mass immigration argument that gets put forward lately.
Yeah, for sure.
You can go for a surprisingly long time with below replacement. For example, a place like the UK has had below replacement for 50 years. Thanks to mass immigration, they still have a growing population, but their their indigenous population is going to start gradually to shrink. And there's a momentum behind, in the same way that there's a momentum behind demographic growth, there's also a momentum behind shrinkage. And so if we continue on this trajectory and the fertility rate is continuing to go down, it's very difficult to reverse. And if you believe in the persistence of your own country and civilization and people, however you could conceptualize them, then this is not a good thing. It would be one thing that if we were just going through a little dip and then recover, but South Korea is the most extreme example.
Yeah.
But I mean, that country is going to basically disappear.
And as far as I understand it, there is nothing that can be done to stop it for South Korea. South Korea is the math on it is
they've gone past a demographic tipping point.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah. So I have changed my mind on something really big, and something that concerned me enormously. One of my favorite pet issues. I have had to completely reverse myself, and now it's a cheap reversal. Okay.
How so?
Because I'm too old to have children. So uncheap reversal involves doing my part and at least replacing myself and my husband. And it's too late for that. Fortunately, I have a brother who had my kids for me. They have 4 children.
All right, there you go.
But I can't help but still be a hypocrite on this point, because I would preach what I did not do. And if I'm going to be truthful, I don't exactly regret on my personal behalf having given a family a miss. I mean, I think I've had the life I wanted. So if I had it to do over again, I would probably make the same decision. But that, honestly, my husband and I would have had beautiful children.
This is a great example of what I'd like to imagine would be what a good society looks like. And a good society looks something like this. I believe that you sold your life short by not having kids, because I think it's one of the most important things we get to do and fulfilling things we get to do. It's why this show is called Dad Saves America, after all. I think you know that. But a good society lets me say that, and you have the freedom to live the life you want to live. And I actually have to say, hey, we're living in the same society together. And hey, you know what? I think you made a mistake, but it's actually it's not up to me. It's your life and you have to live it. And so talk to me about that. Talk to me about how has this transition in your own thinking impacted the way you think about the application of shame in a society? Because I think one of the things that used to be true was that we had a term. It was called being maybe isn't it a spinster? Maybe a spinster is still married. Is not married, but they're
not married.
But we had these.
You were barren.
You were barren. We had these terms that were terms about shame and guilt, meant to apply social pressure, but not outright coercion, so that people would tend to want to and feel some social pressure to do the thing that's probably going to be good for them.
Yes.
So you didn't choose that thing, and now the society doesn't even apply that pressure. How do you think about that? How do you think about the positive virtue of shame and guilt for things that you even maybe didn't do and wouldn't change, even being shamed and guilted?
I've said for some time now that I didn't think enough stigma was applied to my not having children. I think I should have been shamed. I actually did an essay for Unheard about shame, and it was pro-shame. It was pro-stigma. I think I think being a drug addict should be stigmatized, right? And I think that there should be some gentle pressure to have children. I am concerned that any society that is aggressively promoting not having children, perhaps to save the planet, and is also aggressively promoting and celebrating a variety of sexual practices that do not reproduce the species, and is even engaging in and celebrating the neutering of its own children.
Yeah, it's just pure Satan. It's just Satan. All that
no,
stuff. That's like
evil.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is a society that does not believe in itself.
Mm-hmm.
It is in the process of self-destructing. You are sterilizing your kids, and you only care about individual identity and the future be damned. No.
Yeah.
So we now have Pride Month, and that is a celebration of reproductively unproductive strategies, right? I mean, it's true that gay people can now get surrogates, et cetera, but that's not a solution for the entire species. And we've gone way beyond making it possible for the weirdo to be safe and accepted in society, and we have eliminated the norm, and we purely celebrate what should be the rare exception. And this doesn't work. It doesn't work. And I don't know if there's a little chicken and the egg thing about whether or not all these trends that I cited are causing the problem or simply the results of the problem. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
there's a lot of forces and feedback loops all happening at the same time. It's a complex thing. To what extent is fertility simply a function of wealth and education and comfort? Is that the dominant force? What part of it is abortion? I mean, tens of millions of especially Black babies were murdered in the womb so that's I don't like any of that. That happened. We would have a lot more people had that not happened. And then all the rest of the cultural forces we've talked about during this conversation. And those are all indifferent. And some of those are things that are personal choice driven. Some of those are things that are something else going on. Cultural forces.
Mm-hmm. Well, I did an essay. Actually, it was at least 20 years ago for the Guardian magazine, and I posited that what helps explain the change in fertility is really a transformation of what we believe is the meaning of life, the purpose of life. And we used to be much more focused on duty. Duty is now a dirty word.
It's almost a forgotten word outside of the military.
In fact, you hardly ever hear it outside a military context. We don't believe in that either. I mean, a majority of young people in Europe and the United States claim they would not fight for their country. It's another abandonment of duty.
Yeah.
But people didn't purely get married and have children in the past out of duty, obviously, but also desire. They're not necessarily contradictory, duty and desire. And maybe you want to take care of your parents when you're old, but in times past, in many societies, it wouldn't even be a question. That is your duty. We don't think in terms of duty at all anymore. And the purpose of life is now our own personal happiness. That elusive quality, some kind of self-actualization. And therefore, it stops with us, And what I argued in that essay is that that is a misunderstanding of true happiness, which, in my experience, is the product of often a great deal of suffering and hard work and sacrifice. Everything that has meant something to me in my life has been difficult to achieve. That's what makes it meaningful. Books. I don't put books on a par with people at all.
Yeah, but they're a creative enterprise.
They are a
You
creative
birthed them.
enterprise that involve a great deal of work and time and, not watching Netflix or whatever. I also gave the example of going on a really long bike trip, and a lot of which is, if you've ever done that kind of cross-country thing, is utterly miserable. The wind is always blowing in your face, and it's raining, and you can't find a place to camp, and forget it. But once I've done more than one, and once each one was over, I had a sensation of achievement and satisfaction. I think children are the best example of all. That you really have to put everything you've got on the line. They're a huge risk. You don't know who's going to rock up. You don't know how it's going to sort out. You definitely have to make sacrifices. They cost a lot of money. They can break your heart. But if you have a nice combination of luck and skill, there can't be anything more satisfying than a whole functional and delightful human being that you created from nothing. And on the one hand, I don't think I would go back and do it differently, but I am very admiring of parents, and in my own secular way, I think they're doing God's work. And I am always elaborately excited when I hear my friends' kids are pregnant.
What an amazing turnaround for you.
It is an amazing turnaround.
Gosh, I love that. Not just because you've come over to my side, but just because it's just so great. That's part of the thing. That's part of the thing of life, to have to grapple with where you've made mistakes. We have these sayings that have they've become so cliche, and now they don't even, they're no longer, they're almost like radical again. No pain, no gain. It's like, I was just talking to an educator recently, and a woman who's started a new, like, conservative Christian classical school in New Jersey. So talk about going an uphill battle. And we were talking about this, and the no pain, no gain is about as close to a description of the most profound rules of reality as you could imagine. It's like, well, what does it mean? It's like, well, how do humans learn? We start in a position of ignorance, and we struggle through the challenge of going from ignorance to knowledge, which is often painful and almost unnecessarily is painful. In fact, generally, the learning is stickiest when it's painful. Our, like, the moral teachings, including as a Christian, as a Catholic, like the entire premise of Christ is a suffering story. It's a story of the centrality of suffering in the condition of man. I've always, even when I haven't been as connected to my practice of my religion as I am today, looked at that and said, yep, like, the cross is a useful thing. The cross has got truth in it. It's not just a macabre It's, there's stories about, well, Christ used to be the fish, and then it became the cross because the church was being domineering over the populations of Europe. It's like, no, even if that was true, it doesn't even matter. It's like the history bore that out, and the cross survived because of the fundamental truth of suffering as a tool for life, for learning, for life, for being happy. It's like, and like all of psychology tells us this. Everything that's been like replicatable in any sense tells us that, cognitive behavioral therapy, all this stuff, it all points to no pain, no gain.
Yes, and the irony of all this is that in this atomized individualistic model where people aren't, for example, having children because they care about their own personal happiness, is it makes people miserable.
Yes.
I think happiness is a byproduct of pursuing something else.
You are channeling one of my favorite people in the world, Viktor Frankl, when you say that.
Mm-hmm.
The best.
And it's what happens when you have a purpose that you are pursuing with such determination and focus that it doesn't even occur to you to wonder about whether you're happy. If you're sitting around wondering about whether you're happy, you're not happy. That's not what happy people do.
Yeah, it's the funniest thing about the narcissism of our time and the kind of like the toxic byproduct of self-help and selfish movement of that is it is mental illness to obsess about yourself. It is a spiral downward into darkness, into despair, one way I think about this is, what does it feel like when you're sick? Like when you get sick, you get like a bad flu. Suddenly, all you can do is think about your flu and think about yourself. And it's horrible. And everything else in the world that you want to do and want to get on with is like gone, because you can't escape the physical discomfort and the focus on yourself. And it's and it's sickness.
Yeah.
Like focusing on yourself all the time is illness, like definitionally.
Yeah, that's one of the most unpleasant things about becoming ill, is that you become less concerned for others. It limits the energy that you have to connect with other people and to consider their feelings. And it gives you a kind of moral right to demand unreasonably that people are nice to you and you get to be unpleasant to them. But it's not an enviable state.
No. The Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl's book, he puts it that happiness is not pursued, it ensues, right? Mm. And I read that book a couple summers ago, having thought I read it, but realizing that I hadn't, because my son had read it in like 7th grade and it turned him into a stoic, and it like transformed his whole personality. And I was like, wow, I really need to. It's like, I think I read this book, and then I read it and I was like, oh, I didn't read this book. And oh my gosh, this is the book of our time. As we wrap things out, is that your advice for a young person, for a young person, young man, young woman, struggling to be happy, struggling to understand what it means to live a happy life, feeling the world, the chaos of the world through their screens? Like, what's your advice for that person? For that Kevin, let's say.
Yeah, just interest yourself in something outside yourself. The navel gazing it's just a route to misery. It's funny. I used to keep a journal every day, and a little while ago, I just stopped, and it really had to do with the fact that myself didn't interest me as a subject anymore. I had exhausted it. Didn't mean that I wasn't interested in other things and other people, but I was definitely not interested in me. And I haven't looked back. I don't mind. And I do not spend an appreciable period of any day gazing into my own soul. I'll think about something I read, or I'll noodle on the next book, which is also, it's outside me. It's a thing that I want to make, but it's not about me. And this whole thing of the spread of depression and anxiety has to have partly to do with the fact that we're constantly, I think teachers are constantly doing this, pushing their students to contemplate how they feel and
Write your college essay about you.
yeah. And there's nothing there. I mean, this has been one of the themes of some of my essays. Character is not discovered, it is made. And we have lost that concept, that whole notion of, kids know who they are. No, they don't. And partly because they aren't yet. They have not made themselves. You make yourself. As in the same way that I write a novel, you create yourself. And having an identity is about accumulating things. It's not just about thinking or dwelling within. It is going through a lot of experiences, having achievements, having failures, and who you are is also in relation to other people. So, your relationships throughout your life, they help to form what you are. And you become a slightly different entity as you test yourself, you fail, you pick yourself up, you change your mind on something important. And it's a never-ending project. You build your character until the last, you draw your last breath. And that's what's so great about it. It's not just you're a pre-made thing. I think one of the attractions of the transgenderism movement is that it gives people a project. You can go from you go from one sex to the other, ostensibly. Of course, you don't really, but it's a project. But it's a flawed project because it's all about the self. And I think that it's ultimate, and it's also overwhelmingly about the physical self, which has great limitations. So, the good thing about realizing that character is not discovered but made is it's a project that is never over. It is never finished. It is never a completed thing. You will never have nothing to do.
That is beautifully put. It's deep wisdom. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. I know we'll see each other again. I ask this of every first-time guest, as you know. The show is called Dad Saves America because I think that is a role and identity that is serving others as a man that has a profound impact if you choose it, and I recommend it. And it ultimately ladders out to the society, to the country. I think being a dad is probably the single thing I do most that can help save America, if America can be saved, and I hope it can be. How do you think about your role, international as it might be, in the American story?
Well, during the reign of terror we have been living through from the left, I have been one of the only conservative fiction writers in the United States. And That's serving a purpose.
It sure is. Your latest, A Better Life. Lionel Shriver, thanks for being on Dad Saves America.
It's been a pleasure.